And we are live. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all doing amazing this morning. Thank you for joining us here today on what we hope will be a interesting 45-minute presentation and also discussion on cross-border marketplace selling, and particularly highlighting Fruugo, which is, of course, one of Europe's most exciting marketplaces available today. So my name is Gabriel Fabreski, Business Development Manager for Lengow UK. And with me today is a special guest, Håkan from Fruugo.
Thank you. Great to hear someone pronounce my name correctly. My name is Håkan Tyr. I'm Chief Revenue Officer at Fruugo. Great to be here. I'm going to let Gabriel do a bit of an intro, and I'm going to walk you through the Fruugo proposition.
Exactly. So by all means, we hope to share as much of our knowledge and insight as we can into marketplace selling. So by all means, if you have any questions during the talk, you're welcome to ask them at any time. And of course, at the end, we'll be doing a question and answer session as well. So don't hesitate in sticking around. So, of course, one of the main topics we'll be discussing and thinking about today is really why you should be adopting a cross-border approach. So, of course, having gone through the recent months and weeks with the pandemic and lockdown, I think it's beyond question now that having an online presence and an online strategy is now without doubt essential. But really, the one step beyond that is, of course, going cross-border. So selling beyond your own borders to an international market and to a new customer base. So really, two of the main reasons you should be considering cross-border approach is number one, because it's growing, and it will continue to grow and be an important aspect online and for future. And of course, really the second main reason is because that is where your customers and consumers are anyway. So online customers right now, they've already adopted cross-border buying, with over 48% now already buying cross-border. So they're familiar with it, and as well they're comfortable with it right now. And given that these stats were from the end of last year, I can imagine that these have grown since this polling was done. So two main reasons, mainly to grow your customer base and to grow your online business volume, of course. So, of course, the three key markets one could consider when selling cross-border is, of course, US, Asia, and Europe. Of course, for us today, we're focusing mainly on Europe, seeing that that's where Lengow and Fruugo has a good share of our expertise and business. So, a few points for yourselves to consider whether you're a brand or retailer looking to sell cross-border, or if you're already doing it, things that you should be considering anyway. So, of course, the language aspect is typically one of the first blockers that an online seller will find when they come to selling cross-border. So really, in terms of language translation, you mainly have three options available to yourself. So number one, either having an internal team or a merchandising team to translate your listing and your content. Number two, having an outsourcing third-party agency to translate. Or as Håkan will mention, of course, there is a third option, which is quite easy as well. So of course, there are benefits to both of these, either having them done internally or externally. One thing to consider is how often and how much you're adding new products to your range. If you're a brand owner with a limited number of products, you're not adding products as much. Of course, it may make sense to get them translated one-off. But if you're a retailer continually adding products to your range, you may want to have an internal capability to handle that as well. Of course, on the currency side, so luckily within the EU, most of us share the euro. But of course, when you're considering, say, selling into the UK, Nordics, or Eastern Europe, you're going to have to take this into consideration. So making sure that you can price your products to the local currency, and still making sure that you're remaining profitable with your new pricing. Of course, payment methods is becoming more and more crucial now. Consumers, customers, they're looking for these payment options, and they're expecting them now to pay with them. So, of course, whether it's credit card payments or bank transfers or checks or anything else, this is typically a key challenge you'll have to overcome. But of course, luckily, with the marketplace approach, you can use the pre-existing infrastructure and services available on a marketplace instead of having to go through and develop these yourselves. So one important thing to bear in mind. And of course, on the regulation side, so making sure that if you are selling cross-border into different markets, you're making sure that you're abiding by any tax regulations, any other logistics or shipping regulations that you may need to come. So these change quite regularly, so it's good to stay updated on these. And of course, on the consumer habit side of things, so of course, selling into different markets, you want to make sure that your listing and your products are adapted and of course appropriate for the market. So selling perhaps garden and outdoor products, you want to take into account where they may be adapted. You wouldn't want to be selling snow plows and shovels in the Mediterranean, for example. So some questions that get asked by myself and the team, and I'm sure Håkan quite a bit, is where should I be selling my products and how should I be selling my products? So really, for any retailer or brand, the first thing you should be asking yourself and thinking about is determining the market potential and size of where you're looking to sell. So of course, within Europe now, France, UK, and Germany take more than or close to 60% of overall the e-commerce pie. So these three markets are certainly three you should be considering. But of course, beyond that, you want to make sure that you understand the local competition and how your products would compare against any local competitors or pricing. So of course, if you're bringing a new range of products into the market, you want to make sure that there's perhaps a demand for that. So one way of doing that is to ask marketplaces directly if your products will be appropriate for a certain market. Of course, secondly, establishing your pricing and value. So with marketplace selling, of course, pricing is very important. You want to make sure you're competitive against other sellers. But beyond that, you also want to make sure that you're bringing value to the customer as well. So even if you're not competitive on parity, being able to provide good content, good shipping conditions, return policies, even images and other information is things that customers will be looking for beyond pricing. So even if your products, not all of your products are competitive on price, you can still compete on value and other aspects as well. And lastly, identifying which channels to sell across. So, of course, today marketplaces is one of the key focuses, mainly because it's so easy. There's very low risk for entry. You can join quite easily compared to anything else, because really the other options you would have available is to having your own localized website, a transactional website that you can then use for any retargeting or any acquisition channels. So that's why marketplaces is definitely one to consider because of the low risk and the ease of time it takes to join and start selling across a marketplace such as Fruugo. So one motto to consider on this is really to think global but act local. So if you're looking to sell cross-border, of course, you're going to have to manage multiple product feeds, multiple listings and marketing channels and marketplaces. So you want to make sure that you have a centralized approach to managing everything. But of course, each feed and each marketing channel is adapted to the local market, which is quite key. And this falls under the translation and localization aspect. So having already covered translation, we know that that's quite important. Beyond that, you want to make sure that your translation are correct in terms of vocabulary and terms. So really important to avoid any spelling mistakes, making sure you're using the correct keywords or other words that customers are looking for. And of course, on the sizing and measurements and sizing, if you're selling into the UK or France or vice versa, or even into the Nordics, making sure that you're presenting your products with the local size or measurements, because this is what customers will be searching for, will be looking for. So if your products aren't localized on that front, you will be missing out on orders as well. Of course, operating hours, something to consider. Time differences is something to take into account. So making sure that if you do have a customer service team or anything else that needs to be taken into consideration, that you can adapt or at least inform the customers of your operating hours, which ties into the contact information as well. Making sure that you have your contact information, phone number, email address available to customers really solidifies your presence as a serious seller. It will give customers more assurance to make a purchase from you on a marketing channel. And finally, on the holiday events and seasons, so having just gone through a long weekend here, making sure that if there are any holiday events, making sure that your warehousing team or your customer service team are prepared and aware of this. And even on any events occasions. So if there are any sale events, any Black Friday or spring sales or summer sales, these differ from country to country. So making sure that you can adapt perhaps your pricing or any shipping time that may need to be done. And seasonality. So of course, if you're looking to launch into a new market, onto a new marketing channel, ideally you want to time your launch and entry into that market. So with home and garden and outdoor being very popular right now, ideally you want to be live before the start of the season. So if you're looking now to be ready for the end of the year for the holiday and Christmas sale, you're going to want to start thinking about these right now and start acting upon them soon to be ready. And quite interesting, something that came in was added last minute is on the customer expectation side. So very interestingly, one of our data partners, IMRG, has released some interesting data that over the last few weeks and months, customers have been very understanding in terms of shipping time and delays and refunds and payment refunds. So customers are very understanding, but of course that may not always be the case. So for yourselves, making sure that you're being transparent with customers and putting forward all the information as possible. So everything from refund times, making sure that it's stated clearly in your conditions, and of course what the refund conditions will be. So if you do need to refund an order, making sure you're abiding by the local consumer rights laws. And something else, of course, is on the delivery time. Selling cross-border, it's understandable your delivery times may be extended, but just making sure that you're being transparent on this to the customers will reassure them and prevent any negative reviews or unhappy customers. And of course, tying this all together, if you are looking to do a marketplace approach or sell cross-border, that's great. Really, the first step of doing this, however, is to get connected and getting listed into a marketplace or marketing channel. This is really why Lengow was created over 10 years ago now. The overall, what Lengow allows brands and retailers to do is to centralize all of their product feeds and listings into one solution and to more easily connect and list their products abroad and on different countries. So whether you're looking to manage a wide number of feeds or languages, that can be done. Or in this case, if you're looking to test a new market and a new marketing channel, that's the key use you could use it for today. Because of course, with a marketing marketplace like Fruugo, you can very easily test new markets that you may not have even been able to do before, which is really one of the key benefits of Fruugo. And one reason why you may be wondering why we're with Fruugo today is because of this. So Fruugo has done amazing over the last few years in terms of positioning themselves as the cross-border experts. Right now, number 2 in terms of online presence and marketplace presence. So if you are now looking to sell on marketplaces and beyond on cross-border. Fruugo is definitely one thing that you should be considering. And of course, Håkan will now be happy to tell you more about it, I'm sure.
Thank you, Gabriel. A nice handover. Yeah, so I'm going to start by walking you through an overview of Fruugo and how we help brands and retailers expand globally. And then I'm going to give you a quick case study of a UK seller that we worked with. And finally, I'm going to spend a little bit of time looking at, I guess, sales on the platform during this COVID-19 period, as well as how retailers are adapting and what they're doing to, I guess, benefit from it, if we want to look at it that way. So let's see if we can figure these slides out. Here we go. All right. So first of all, Fruugo was built from the ground up to make cross-border as easy as possible. So what Gabriel outlined were a lot of the challenges that you will face if you are trying to go direct cross-border. So Fruugo was kind of built to address most of those. So first of all, today we have localized sites in 46 countries across the globe. And what that means in terms of what does localized mean? Well, first of all, we help get over the language barrier. So we have translation into 28 different languages right now. And yeah, we do that using largely machine translation. We have a couple of different translation engines powering that. And while machine translation will never, or at least not for the foreseeable future, be as good as a native speaker, it is good enough to support consumers in making a purchase decision, which is kind of the important part. One very important aspect of what we do is that we invest heavily in driving search traffic, not to the site, but to your products. So, and we're going to look at the customer experience in a bit, but fundamentally, the vast majority of our traffic comes from search engines, predominantly Google, and goes straight to the product page where the consumer transacts. So one of the reasons why you may not have heard of Fruugo is that we don't market ourselves as a destination. We drive consumers looking for a product to that product. An important part of localization, and Gabriel alluded to this as well, is to be able to support not only local currency, but also local payment methods. It's easy, particularly in the UK, to believe that everyone in the world pays by credit card, and it's that easy, right? There are EU countries where the preferred payment method is bank transfer. So Finland, for example, that's the biggest payment method. Not to mention, pay cash on delivery, pay installments, that kind of thing. So it's really important to be able to support the preferred local payment methods to truly be localized. We take care of the currency conversions, so you don't need to keep track of all of these different currencies as you expand into Europe. We take the FX risk, so you send us your products with one currency, be that euros or GBP or whatever. We will translate or convert that into the local currency of the countries you sell in, and then you get paid in the currency that you sent us the feed in. So you get paid in euros, and you don't deal with the FX risk involved. Finally, first of all, we handle first-line customer support as well in local language. And as importantly, you get a dedicated account manager. So someone you can actually call up and have a conversation with. If you have any experience selling on some of the larger marketplaces, you will know that is extremely hard when you're dealing with an automated machine rather than a person. All right, so let's talk about localized globally. What does localized mean? So have a screenshot here of a dress from the UK site. And so what you will see on a localized site, obviously, is that, all the kind of the navigation is in English. This is the UK site. Pricing is in sterling. You have the most common payment methods available. And if we then look at what this would look like, surprise, surprise, in Sweden, it's in Swedish. Obviously, all the payment methods that you'd expect to see there. Oh, wait, no, this is the Dutch site. Never mind. I was trying not to be Swedish. You get pricing in euros, and this being in Netherlands, you can pay with Ideal, which is one of the dominant payment methods in the Netherlands, which no one outside of the Netherlands heard of, but it's really important to be able to support that. So we've added that for our Dutch customers. And the interesting part here is this is actually a German seller selling this product. So it's been translated to English and to Dutch and converted into sterling, and well, presumably they sent it in euros, but it's been localized from a different language. And all right, so a few numbers to kind of help you understand our business. So we're growing more than 100% year on year in terms over the last 3 years. We'll see that graphically in a bit. We added 14 new countries that you can sell into last year, and we're going to keep adding countries. This year, we have added another 8 countries you can sell from, including China and Turkey, that are countries that we've seen a lot of signups from in the last couple of months. And I think probably the most important fact to remember to illustrate how we operate is that 85% of our sales cross a border. So there's really no other marketplace that comes anywhere near that. So that kind of illustrates our focus on cross-border. We are whitelisted with Google in 20 countries, which means that when we launch your products into those countries, you will have impact quickly. You don't need to wait for your quality score to build up. Yeah. And we have over 1,000 sellers live at this point.
I think so if there's something else I can mention, I think the other really refreshing thing about Fruugo is the fact that you're a pure marketplace. So it's just your sellers, your brands, retailers selling. You're not competing against them at the same time.
Nope. No, we don't deal with any wholesale. We don't touch product at any point. We simply facilitate it. Yeah. So for last year, these were the top 10 countries. UK and Switzerland were virtually identical in size. I think there were literally like 3,000 euros between them. Which is, I mean, UK is not surprising. Switzerland probably is. Then you have Sweden and Norway feature really, really high as well. And obviously, Germany and France make the top 10. And then US and Australia are on there as well. I guess, obviously, we cover the usual suspects here. But I think the interesting point is that we also kind of fill in the gaps, if you will. So we reach the countries that you may struggle to reach through other marketplaces. So the Nordics, Switzerland, we do really well.
And if I can, Håkan, interesting question here. I think that might be relevant. Yep. That is Charlotte asking, how big is your food and consumable category on Fruugo? Or do you have a food and consumable category?
Yeah, we do. Obviously, we don't do fresh food. Shipping tomatoes from Spain to the UK might be a bit hard, but if it's non-fresh, then yeah, we support that. It's an interesting question about categories, because ultimately, because of how we drive traffic to our site, the important thing is how in demand are your products. If there's someone out there searching for your products, we can probably find them and we can put your product in front of them. So, and that's, I guess, doesn't matter what the category is. We can do that for pretty much any category if the demand is there. Having said that, our main categories are what you'd expect from e-commerce in general. So clothing, shoes, accessories is our biggest category. We sell a lot of tech. Sporting does really well as well. So it's pretty much what you expect. Home and garden is right up there as well.
Yeah.
So quickly on the commercial model. So the commission rate is 15%, again, across all categories. We charge 2.35% of a fund processing fee, and that's not something that we pocket. That's what goes straight to PayPal or Ideal or whoever the payment provider is, because obviously they take a cut. So that's where that comes from. The process is what you'd expect from any marketplace. So a customer places an order, you fulfill it. You can access your orders either directly or probably through Lengow. Once the statutory cooling off period is over, you get paid, and as I said, you get paid in your local currency, and we send you an invoice outlining what the orders were that you just got paid for, so you can keep track of that.
Okay. And a very relevant question from Casper on that point is on the payment frequency. How often are you paying your sellers, and when are the funds transferred to their account, or how?
Every 2 weeks, and we pay it into your bank account as part of setting your account up. You define where you want it paid to. And important to point out that we don't charge a monthly fee. There's no subscription or anything like that. So it's a very low risk endeavor. You don't, especially if you're working with Lengow, to make the integration that simple, you don't really take much of a risk by launching. We do have some requirements. It may not be for everyone, but in terms of the absolute requirements, you do need GTINs or some form of unique identifier, be that EINs or ISBNs or whatever it is, but we do need to know what the product is. Again, this comes down to the ability to promote your product on search. You need to have adequate data. Again, this Lengow can certainly help you with that. And you need to be able to send it automatically. So you can send us a regularly sent automated feed. Yeah. And that's obviously why we like to work with integrators like Lengow, is because they remove a lot of the complexity. Yeah. It might seem like a no-brainer, but you need to be able to ship abroad to the countries you choose to sell in. It's kind of, you can't just sell in your home country. And obviously your products need to be allowed by Google for us to be able to promote them. So no guns or drugs or anything like that, I'm afraid. What helps make you successful is obviously to be price competitive. Bigger category or catalog, the better, and obviously in demand. And if you can negotiate good shipping costs, that's certainly going to help as well. All right, so quick case study. So Price Rate Home, or Argofield as the company is named. They're a UK company. They sell kind of home decor, a lot of kids' room stuff, wallpaper, beddings, those kind of things. They have a lot of high quality products. They're also very, I guess, in demand. Obviously, they do characters that are being requested by kids, and so they had started selling direct abroad, set up some local sites, and they kind of, were trying it out themselves. They sell on eBay and Amazon in the UK. They've tried selling across Europe as well, but they struggled because of the need to do advertising on the marketplace. So it's not just enough to list. You also need to put a lot of effort into getting visibility on the marketplace. So what they did, since they were kind of struggling, they felt like they were missing an opportunity, that there was more to be done internationally.
Yeah.
So they launched on Fruugo in July last year, and I'm ambivalent about this, but I hear it often. It's like, yeah, we had low expectations. So,
Mm,
okay, I guess it's good to overperform, but yeah. So they said, okay, if we get 10 orders a day, that'd be good enough.
mm,
And what they ended up finding is by the end of the year, they were doing over 65 a day on average, and at peak they were getting 250 orders a day. So
wow.
for something where 10 had been enough, obviously that was kind of a roaring success for them.
Mm,
And one interesting, this is me being Swedish again, but I swear that's not why I picked this case study. What they did is they launched in multiple countries and then obviously saw where did they have impact. And they did well in the English-speaking countries, Australia, US, reasonably well in Canada,
mm,
across Europe, but turned out that Sweden was the big winner. So before they launched on Fruugo, they were getting less than an order a day through kind of eBay or Amazon orders. And for the rest of the year, they had 12 orders a day on average and ended up doing over 3,000 orders in 2019. So obviously, it's a great way and a great showcase of how you can use Fruugo to kind of identify where the demand is globally. Because I don't think they would have kind of sat down, looked at the map, and said Sweden's going to be the winner. So,
seeing that that was such a surprise to them, do you know what was the reason behind the success? Was it the seasonality, the pricing? Was there no competitor in the Swedish market? They just took it by storm, or was it
funny you'd ask.
a mix of everything?
Yeah, so I think
Oh, there we go.
yeah, there you go. I think they have good products.
Yeah.
They have good data. They had managed, and this is one of the things they call that as a competitive advantage, is they managed to negotiate good shipping costs with their providers. But I think in the case of Sweden in particular, since there is no eBay, no Amazon really in Sweden, and no really dominant local player,
Mm,
the Google shoppers are a lot more common than they are in the UK. So in the UK and to some extent in France, you will, a lot of people start on Amazon. That's like their default go-to to find a product.
mm.
In a lot of countries, that's not the case. So they start with Google or some other local search, and that's where we catch them, if you will. So in a country like Sweden, where there's a high use of Google and no local real competitor, we tend to do really well, and that was accentuated with Orgerfield.
That's a good point. So instead of staying in the bigger, more competitive markets and losing out on your margin, finding the less competitive markets and countries and
Yeah, no,
attacking them.
absolutely. All right. So we've seen this one. Figured I'd run through a few of the observations of what we've seen in terms of trading on the platform and how sellers have dealt with this rather exceptional period in the last few months. So first, this is a graph of weekly orders on Fruugo for the last, I guess, 6 years. I guess it illustrates our growth nicely, but that's not really the point. The main point is the shape of the curve. So what you see year on year is that the first quarter is slow. It picks up a bit in the summer, and then you get this drastic spike at peak. And anyone who sells anything, you're familiar with this trend, because it's kind of what retail and e-commerce sees year on year. So this was up until, well, end of last year. And so this is what we have seen in 2020. So this is through week 18. So it started out kind of the way it usually does. And then once lockdown started, it absolutely went crazy. So it's a few weeks back when I pull this data. Um, we had 6-7 weeks at that point where we had been higher than peak in 2019, and we're still like we're 3 weeks on now, I think, and we're still above peak levels from last year. So trading has been absolutely through the roof, and we are starting to see it come down. So, but it's still higher than it was peak last year. So trading on the platform is absolutely crazy, and obviously this is something that we've seen across most e-commerce sites. I think the fact that we have such global reach and such a large catalog means that it's been kind of accentuated on Fruugo. So our growth seems to be higher than a lot of the ones that I've seen reported, and I think this because we offer people everywhere a chance to buy pretty much everything. So that's what we have seen on the platform so far this year.
So it seems like definitely Q3 would be a good time to start joining Fruugo to get into the Q4 sales season.
Yeah, and I would say probably at any point it's a good time to.
Especially now.
Yeah, I don't honestly know what the new normal will look like. I, like me and everyone else, kind of predicts that it will come down, but it will not come down to the levels we would have predicted in, when we sat around at the end of last year creating budgets for this year. People have gotten used to buying stuff online that they never would have bought. People can't buy bread in the store, so they're buying flour online to bake. And we'll talk about that in a sec. So yeah, I think the new normal was going to have a definite shift towards online buying behavior. So here are some observations from kind of the start of the lockdown and what people ended up buying. So obviously out of the gate, it was the panic buying categories. So we sold tons of hand sanitizer, and we still do. But people were buying 5-liter bottles of hand sanitizer and face masks, obviously. Toilet paper. I think people in the UK must have run out of space to store all the extra toilet paper because that's come down now. And then as kind of reality started setting in and people figured that I'm going to be at home for a while, a lot of people like me, I've been working from home for whatever it is, 6 weeks now. So we sold a lot of electronics, a lot of computer screens, cables, things like that, as people were setting up home offices. And also people started caring more about their health and they realized that the gym was closed. So we sold a lot of sporting, like home exercise equipment and a lot of vitamins and things like that. Yeah. And then as things moved along, people started to realize that they need to do some of the things themselves that they've had done by others before. So we started selling a lot of hair coloring, clippers, as people realize they need to cut their own hair. And as I mentioned, flour for baking, a lot of sewing accessories. And I think a lot of that was making face masks, actually. But people are starting to make stuff themselves. And then kind of as we approached Easter and the weather, at least in the UK, has been really, really nice. People have started spending more time in the garden. So a lot of garden equipment. We had a spike in like inflatable swimming pools. And it's also flea and tick season. So people who used to go to the vet are now buying those kind of things like flea collars online. So we've seen a lot in the pet category as well. So that's kind of what we've seen in terms of the evolution of demand. And I think one interesting anecdote was this was on May 1st in the Netherlands. So Professor Peter van der Voort, sorry if I butchered that name, was on some program on Dutch television talking about this potentially helpful antioxidant that may help with recovery. the resveratrol, and it was, as you can see from the quote, it was pretty vague. It was not very committing, but what you can kind of predict what happened next, right? So everyone watching got out their phone and they Googled resveratrol and they bought everything they could find. And what happened on Fruugo was we had 5 sellers that none of them were based in the Netherlands who had an immediate spike in sales for this fairly obscure supplement.
Wow.
And several of them like actually sold out within a day. Uh, and the main point that that illustrates is kind of as the title of the slide is you have to be in it to win it, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have your products in market when the demand spikes, you will never know, you will never experience that spike. So in this case, the UK sellers of this supplement probably would never have heard of it, let alone being able to sell a whole bunch of product if they hadn't been on fruugo.nl. So.
Interesting.
And as an illustration of kind of what retailers are doing, this graph shows the signups for Fruugo. So sell.fruugo.com is our seller site where you would go to sign up. And as you can see, in April, we doubled the number of signups from last year. And we had, well, not quite doubled by the 20th of May, but at this point, we are doubling in May as well. So it's clear that what retailers are doing is that they're understanding that the importance of online and they are looking for new channels. And a lot of them are coming to Fruugo, which obviously we're happy to see. And we're glad to be able to help them kind of diversify in this rather chaotic time.
And on that, there's actually a very relevant question from Philippe asking, how long does it take for a seller to complete the onboarding and onboarding process? And I imagine, how do they create an account with you? What would you need in terms of company information to create a Fruugo account?
So if you go to, the process works like this. So you go to sell.fruugo.com, there's a registration form where you provide some basic information about what you're selling, linked to where we can see your catalog, and some basic company information. We will get in touch with you and follow up with any questions we may have. Obviously, because you saw the list of requirements early on, we do vet every seller to make sure that we can actually help you. Because if you're selling a product, if you have 10 products that no one is searching for,
Yeah.
there's not much we can do for you. So we want to make sure that we can actually help you before we bring you onto the platform. And then after that, we'll send you a second form where you fill in kind of company details, the bank account you want to get paid into and all that. So that's kind of the process for getting signed up.
Mm.
In terms of integration, if you're working with Lengow, it's a lot easier because you don't need to create your own feeds. So as how long it takes depends a bit on the size of your catalog. I've seen sellers with, product count in the hundreds go live within a week from when they got access to their account. So I guess it depends on how much effort you put into the integration and to some extent how big your catalog is, but it is not a multi-month project, definitely.
Mm. Yeah, two very important points from the Lengo's perspective. Definitely having all your product information, your feed and listing ready to go. Of course, if you have a feed, you have all the information, it's all structured and ready, we can start moving very, very quickly. But of course, if there's information missing, things you need to add, things you need to perhaps get information from your supplier or manufacturer, that's typically what will slow the process down. So yeah, very important.
Cool.
So there we have contact information. Of course, thank you for listening, everyone. We still have a few more questions we haven't got around to answering, so we'll try get to all of them right now. A interesting question from Jorge Jojda. Apologies if I'm saying that wrong. But Håkan, if you could explain a bit on the supply chain process of the product preparation or the order process. Does it go directly to the shopper, or are there any local or intermediary companies or partners they can ship their product to then be shipped further?
Uh, well, so generally we don't have a kind of freight forwarding solution or anything like that. So it's up to the seller to get the product to the buyer and within the promised time. Depends a little bit of where you're selling, where you're shipping from. We have partners we can introduce you to if you need help with that,
Yeah.
but we don't do any fulfillment ourselves. We have fulfillment partners we work with, but we don't touch the product.
Okay. And is just from my curiosity, then, is there a minimum shipping time, or a seller needs to abide by, or is it up to each
Yeah,
seller?
so we require you to be able to fulfill, well, to get the order to the consumer within 14 days.
Hmm.
So obviously you need to pick the countries based on where you can meet that promise.
Okay. Okay, great. And we having more questions coming in. That's great. Perhaps for Håkan as well, could you explain a bit more how the VAT and tax side of things is managed? Do they have to have the information in the fee? Do you calculate it? How's that done?
Um, well, that's a long question. um, yeah, I would. So obviously, we have built tax and VAT regulations into the platform, and we keep track of that. When you sell cross border within Europe, you need to keep track of the thresholds for each country, and obviously that you will probably be selling into multiple countries through multiple channels.
Mm.
So ultimately, it's up to you to keep track of how much you're selling across all channels. So while we help you understand if you're approaching the threshold on Fruugo, ultimately you need to keep track of that yourself. But we do help you manage it on the platform. I would say if you go to well, I can send you a link to the excruciating detail of how it's managed.
Mm.
But yeah, considering that we only have 12 minutes,
There's
yeah,
more information on on the site, I
yeah,
imagine.
and I'm happy to send that over.
Perfect, great. And an interesting one from Stephen on the philosophical aspect of a marketplace. Does Frugo consider themselves a marketplace, so competition to Amazon, or a price comparison, since you work on a commission and not a CPC model?
We,
There's a lot in that. Yeah.
yeah, no, absolutely. Good question. We definitely see ourselves as a marketplace. I mean, most marketplaces work on a commission model. Even the difference is we don't have a fixed fee. But yeah, we're. I mean, you can argue that a large part of what we do is paid search, and
Mm.
about half of what a retailer pays us in commission is reinvested into search. So yeah, we do drive a lot of the traffic through search, but we are definitely a marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from my perspective on that, it's definitely more a cost per order model that the seller will be facing, which is one of the great things of the Frugo marketplace, that there's no upfront investment, there's no acquisition you have to put down in front. If you don't have any orders, you don't have a commission fee, and of course you only have a price when you have an order. So every time you make an order, is when there's the cost. So perhaps an important thing to bear in mind. One from Peter as well. Do you have many? Great question. Do you have many factories or manufacturers, I imagine, using Frugo to sell direct to the consumer? So interesting point. Do you know the breakdown in terms of retailers, brands, manufacturers?
I don't know the breakdown. I'd say the majority are retailers, but we certainly have a good number of manufacturers selling direct as well. So I guess ultimately it comes back to, do you have a direct-to-consumer model or not? And a lot of manufacturers aren't set up to ship directly to consumers. And that it's kind of that fundamental shift. Like, have you, the brand, shifted to a direct consumer model or not? Because if you're still doing wholesale and that's your only route to market, then you're going to struggle to sell on Fruugo, because you need to have kind of shifted to that direct to consumer.
It is the first really mental block is really the desire and the desire to go direct to consumer. I think beyond the product feed, the content, and the logistics side of it, probably the other thing to consider is on the customer service aspect and returns aspect. I think a lot of manufacturers that I speak to are used to sending pallets and crates of products. One thing you'll have to adapt to is sending individual products to an individual customer, and of course managing the return, taking it back. So any manufacturers listening, it's absolutely as possible and something you should really consider. But yeah, there are some operational things to consider. And great. So another question from Gasper that Håkan just answered. I'm not sure if everyone can see the response, but how large is the Fruugo catalog at the moment? So in terms of SKU count, number of categories, Håkan?
Yeah, SKU count is about somewhere around 25 million. So there are a lot of products on the platform. It has virtually all the usual categories you'd expect from any broad multi-category site. So you can find pretty much anything on there.
Okay. Brilliant. And another one from Vladislav. Is it possible to sell goods only to EU residents if the seller isn't EU? So is cross-border possible?
That is a good question. We have 36 different countries you can sell from. So it depends a little bit on where Vladislav is based. And then another common question is, do I have to sell to all countries? No, you don't. What we ask is you sell to a minimum of 2 foreign countries. So if you're selling furniture, large products like that out of France, then maybe Australia doesn't make a lot of sense. But you can certainly sell to, Spain, Italy, countries around you, Belgium, Netherlands, probably, but a minimum of 2. If you are based in one of those 38 countries, depends a little bit on where you are. So in some countries, you can't sell in your own country. It's purely cross-border. Again, there's a list on our site, and I can send out a link to that afterwards as well.
I think that answers then Roger's question, who was asking, when listing on Fruugo, is it possible to make only certain products available for a specific country? For example, I am based in Switzerland and want to sell only into Switzerland. So something like that would not be possible?
You can't sell only into your own country. It needs to be a cross-border proposition.
Yeah, I mean that's the key.
And that's kind of the point.
That's the key. Yeah. The key value of Fruugo is to go cross-border, to explore new markets, to test the water before further committing or investing. And Stephen is asking on the order tracking. In order to track purchases, you need to build a tracking. How do you overcome this issue with customers who worry about data protection? So 2 questions in that. Do sellers need to provide tracking information? And on the data protection, how do you protect customer data? What data are you sending to sellers to manage their orders? Would be the 2 questions.
So we don't require you to ship tracked. We certainly encourage it. In the data that's passed to us, you would pass a tracking ID and a tracking link so that we can provide that to the seller. I think that information is fairly anonymous, so I don't think there's much concern regarding that data. But obviously, it's a better customer experience if you provide us with tracking information so that the consumer can keep an eye on where their products are.
Yeah, tracking information, even if it's desired or not essentially mandatory, I think from personal experience, it's great to have, because you're giving the customer information beforehand. You'll save yourself time because they won't be messaging you, inquiring about their order, asking where it is. So
Yeah,
if you can do it, I definitely recommend to do it, even if there is perhaps an added cost to that.
yeah, no, it's definitely provides a better experience.
So I think that may be all the questions, unless we have missed any certain questions. Changes. This might be a very specific question here, but does Fruugo have a CBD category? So cannabis oil.
Yes, no, we don't.
Not yet.
Again, it's down to Google. When Google opens that up, we certainly will.
Do you have a list of categories that aren't? Or I guess they can see. You can see by searching, but you mentioned before that there's certain categories you won't have at all.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you can either go to our site or go to Google and see what's not allowed. So we can't sell anything, like basically anything that can potentially hurt people or that's offensive. And unfortunately, Google still consider cannabis oil to be part of that. So, but
Yeah. So,
no, like hunting knives or anything, on that ilk.
so for Adrian, then it's not at the moment, but perhaps in future, if things change with Google, they will be
Yeah.
applicable. So I think that was now all the questions we've gone through. I apologize if we've missed anybody, but by all means, you have our information, contact details right in front of you. You should also be receiving an email after this with a replay of this webinar. So you're welcome to share with your colleagues or anyone else who may have missed it. And besides that, I hope you've enjoyed it, taken some information from it, and really take the opportunity to grow cross-border and to do it very easily with Fruugo.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.